I'd like us to move on to our second speaker, if that's okay, Elizabeth Blaney, whose title today is Women in Housing, the Foundation of Community. And Elizabeth is joining us all the way from LA, so I think it's much earlier in the morning for her, and she's been here for a long time, so thank you so much for that. So Elizabeth Blaney co-founded Union de Vecinos in 1996, and she's been a community organiser for the last 25 years. She co-created the first tenant union on the east side of Los Angeles, as well as the citywide Los Angeles Tenant Union in 2015. And I know that particular organisation has been a particular inspiration for Living Rent, actually, so I'm keen to explore those links too. She represents Union de Vecinos on the International People's Assembly, which brings members of social justice movements from 90 countries together. She's also a member of the international artist collective Ultra Red, which is focused on projects around HIV/AIDS, housing, migration, gentrification, and education. So I'll hand over to you, Elizabeth. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, thank you. And good morning, well, I guess afternoon for many of you. Yes, so I'm here in Los Angeles. Union de Vecinos was founded primarily by women, by 36 families back in 1996 in response to the proposed demolition of what we call here public housing, you all call socialized housing. And this was part of President Clinton's campaign to eliminate 100,000 units of public housing across the country. And our development was about 1,300 families and was one of the first targeted places in the country to hit. And women organized to fight against that. We weren't able to completely stop the entire demolition, but we were able to guarantee the right for the residents to be able to stay on site during the demolition and reconstruction, and they would be shuffled around. From that, we expanded to form neighborhood committees, organizing building by building, block by block, and each of the committees then identify their own campaign. It could be around violence prevention, pedestrian safety, clean water, because many of our neighborhoods don't even have clean water that comes out of the faucets, air quality issues. So we're really based on whatever the issue is as prioritized by the community members, who are primarily low-income families and immigrant families from Central America and Mexico. A common theme in all of our committees has always been housing. And as a result of that, we formed the first tenant union on the east side of Los Angeles, and then later the larger LA Tenants Union back in 2015. So for us, housing is really the stabilizing force. It is the place where you can't get a job, you can't get an education, you can't care for yourself if you're sick, if you don't have a house to stay in, a decent, safe, and sanitary house to stay in. And so protecting that, and from that, that's really the basis of where all community is built, where networks are established, where roots are formed, where people interact together. And so our work has really been around that right to housing, that preservation of housing, because we see the relationship between landlord and tenant as a very exploitative one. As tenants, we are forced into these situations where we have to pay 50%, and in many cases, 60, 70, 80% of our salary to some landholder who already has a home, who has a primary residence. And then all the other properties that he or she owns is really a way of massing and accumulating wealth. And so how do we break that exploitative relationship? And that's a lot of what our focus is. How do we change the balance of power between tenant and landlord? Right to housing for us is about having control over your housing, where you are never under the threat of eviction. You are never under that being forcibly removed from your home. And control can come in different ways. It doesn't always necessarily have to be just about having a title to your home, as we've learned from our comrades in Venezuela. And I could talk a little bit more about that because it's very much connected to how they are working to decommodify housing, which is something that we support and strive for here. So part of what I wanted to share are 3 different ways in terms of how we've been challenging that balance of power between tenant and landlord. And then I'm going to close with a little clip of a video so you'll be able to hear some of the voices of the women who are in leadership here in Los Angeles. So one of the ways that we have done that has been through rent strikes. In the housing movement here in Los Angeles, a rent strike was something that many organizers and even attorneys would shy away from, which we could never understand because the tenants were always more ready to do it than the attorneys or the organizers. And so we had a couple, and rent strikes back in, I would say like 2010, they were really more around getting relocation and time to move, as opposed to fighting to stay. And so we had a very successful rent strike in 2017 that was, the tenants received an $800 a month rent increase, and that there was like, tenants were thinking, okay, well, I just have to move. I can't afford that. And so we started talking about, why don't you strike? What have you got to lose? You have nothing to lose. If you're prepared to leave anyways because you can't afford it, let's stay and fight this. And so it was a 9-month rent strike, of which at the end of the day, they won the first collective bargaining agreement for tenants here in Los Angeles. They were able to convert a building that was not under rent control. We don't have rent control at that time in most of the state, into a building that was rent control. They got all of their repairs to the building fixed, and they got to keep 6 months of the 9-month rent strike of their back rent. And they negotiated a rent increase that was affordable to them. As a result of that success, and this became not just a neighborhood campaign, but also more of a citywide campaign, because it was about evicting mariachis. And in Los Angeles, mariachis, it's a cultural icon and asset here. It began a wave of rent strikes across the city that were about staying in place. That then eventually led to the foundation for our rent strike in 2020 around food, not rent. And because the pandemic hit, everybody was in lockdown. And so we started a national rent strike in conjunction with other organizations in Chicago and New York and Miami, across the country. That eventually then now has gotten us to the point where the government now is paying the rent debt for 18 months, at least here in California, that tenants accumulated. The other thing, 2 methods I want to talk about, was this rapid response team that we have formed as a result of a lot of illegal evictions that everyone, I'm sure, in Scotland and in other parts of the world are experiencing, where tenants go to work, they come back, their stuff is on the street. Legal process, no court hearing, the landlord's fed up and he starts throwing those things on the street. And so what we've been able to do is then go back and reclaim these apartments. And pre-COVID, tenants were not always ready to reoccupy or fight against their landlord. But during COVID, as they would see the success of the rent strike and see being able to push back against their landlord and having some wins, became very empowering experience. And so we would have women, I have bolt cutters in the back of my car. Many of us have saws and tools. And so we always tell the tenant that if you have the landlord there throwing your things out, don't call the police, because the police are the army of the landlord. Call the tenants union. We are the army of the tenants. And so we go back out, we change the locks, we cut through metal doors, we put up new doors, and we get the tenants back into their home and reclaim that space with them. And tenants are much more willing to do that. The last thing I'll talk about is a campaign around in Boyle Heights. Boyle Heights is half a mile from downtown LA, prime real estate property. It's a community of primarily immigrant labor over a number of years with some industry. So we started to see in 2014, 15, 2016, New York money buying up a lot of these warehouses to convert them into galleries. And this was right located next to public housing. And because we had a long history of organizing against demolition and a lot of our members working for change to improve the conditions in the neighborhood, very oppressive political, economic, and social conditions, started a campaign to kick the galleries out. That this was not a community that was going to allow for art washing. We made it very, very uncomfortable for galleries to operate. to have their exhibitions, to bring people across the river to try and occupy the space. And even the galleries wanted to change how we used our parks to be able to be in service of their patrons. And we were able to go ahead and kick out many of the galleries that were along that. So I see that my time is about up. So I just wanted to close with just showing a little bit of a video that talks a little bit about our history and highlights some of the women leadership. I will also put the full video, the link in the chat, so you can watch the full video later, but this is just one little piece.